what a couple of weeks it's been for our community. Over the past couple of weeks, we've had some real developments here as it pertains to our school district, uh, culminating in the voting down of the budget. And but preceding that, some great meetings that happened previously. All of the folks that showed up at the Edith L. Dye Library, just fantastic. I got a chance to really walk people through some of those documents and that we had shared through in BZ Part 2. During that, though, it really became apparent to me that as some folks are kind of following the blog, which I really appreciate, I would ask you to really get the full flavor of the story. If you haven't already, go back to some of these blogs when you have time. Sit down in an actual computer, and if you're on an actual laptop computer, you should be able to, when you click on the video, I often do the introduction, and then just click on the link below so the documents will come up, and I'll walk you right through, kind of like amateurish Khan Academy. Really seeing the documents will bring a lot of this to light. The folks that I've talked to have actually seen the documents and follow along. It really brings to light what we're talking about. It's just not me talking or me sharing my opinion. I really haven't shared much of my opinion yet at all. I haven't really shared the full story of what's happened at all. My plan as of now is really not to do that, because my goal is to really benefit our students and engage our community, which has happened. That also brings up another piece, and I'm going to go over some documents that I was referencing during the recent meeting at the gymnasium, in which the reaction was less than well. If you were there, you saw what the reaction was that I received. But I was actually looking at documents on my phone, and my question really pertained to cost of administration, looking at quality of work, but kind of got sidetracked there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing I wanted to make sure that I got in is that I'm very excited to let you all know that there are a couple of groups that have been forming, working on getting themselves all set up, and there will be some communications coming out in the near future that should be helpful for anybody that would like to get involved. For that reason, I've actually set up, if you're on the computer and you look off to the right, you'll see an area where you can subscribe by email. And what this will do is, if there's a post here, you get an email. I'll be the only person that actually sees that you've signed up, but it'll also allow me to also share any other information that I might not put out on this Pluglit blog. If there is a meeting, or if there are items happening that you may be of interest of, and we can kind of go from there as well. So with these groups, some citizens initiatives out there, they've been very successful in the past, and once again, they are being designed with our students in mind, and really to take me out of it. Really, one of the things that you probably saw, if you've gone to a school board meeting, or if you were at the academy, the reaction was a little bit, I guess, on the hostile side. I want to make sure that I'm not detrimental to the benefit of our students. One of the ironies as I was gone for about a week was, as I got to sit back and think about things, was that when I think about work life, when I think about community involvement that I have, when I think about the different organizations I've been involved with, I apparently carry credibility from everywhere from my church to where I work, from the community involvement activities that I'm in. In my day-to-day operations, I seem to have credibility from Belfast, Maine, to Brea, California, to Dallas, Texas, up to Kalispell, down to Arkansas, across to Florida, up through the Carolinas, into the New England region, and then multiple countries. But for some reason, my name and myself just have no credibility with the members of the school board, even though I've known some for quite some time. And so for me to continue to try to work with the school board members in this capacity really seems to be pretty well fruitless. Fortunately, there are some members of our community that are very intelligent, very engaged, have stepped forward, and we'll talk about that as time goes on as well. So if you are interested in being engaged in some of that work, go ahead and subscribe to the email. I will by email, and I can send you a couple of highlights so we can see where you would fit in best and in your interest. So with the meeting, I did want to, once again, I have not accused anybody of anything. I have not called anybody out. I'm not making anything personal. But I did want to get an answer from our board regarding the amount of money that we spend on administration, and when you look at the quality work we have. Now, when I did that, I actually was looking at documents. So if you were to pull up the documents now, you see the documents reference to the June 8th budget meeting. So if we go to the first document, you will see that a comment was made during this meeting of which the Finance Committee approves all of the purchases. Well, at the time that that comment was made, I happened to be showing someone sitting next to me this slide, of which will show that there is a disbursement for with no approval, one on the disbursement, and the proper approvals are not there. And once again, this is why it's good to look at the documents. You'll see it's right there. I'm not making this up. This is a document that was provided from our administration to a member of the public, and you'll see there is no approval, and there are not the appropriate signatures. Now, our treasurer's job is to make sure that this is followed. We have policies in place. But on the right hand side, you will see that this was received as a payment. So even though the proper approvals are not here, you see that the payment was made. That would show a lack of controls, right? So it seems pretty straightforward. So if you go to the next one, the other thing I was looking at and I referenced was another thing when you have controls in place, and that's why it's so important for the Finance Committee to be engaged and provide the oversight that they have. You'll see that there are a couple circles on this one on the left-hand side, and you'll see that it does show down below. There's a couple arrows that show that we have a person that's ineligible for a stipend. But if you look up top, you'll see their name and employee number, and the employee numbers, once again, as I mentioned, VZ Part 2, flip-flop back and forth with another control. And you'll see that there's a stipend apparently being paid. I'm not making this up. This is actually in the document. Anybody can look at it. It's right there. When you go to the next one, this one just kind of shows what it looked like when they were supposed to be getting a stipend. You see the 2, 12/30, and 14/30 on the right-hand side. You'll see starting in August, 14/30 starts to get a stipend again. And it'll show that it goes throughout the year. The other thing that I referenced was the health insurance benefits that are being paid out of a stipend benefit from this contract that we have, of which was always presented as a stipend. And so my question once again was, this is where I kind of asked with system administration, and when I was pushed to ask a yes or no question, I asked a yes or no question. Is all the cost of system administration included in the system administrative line item? After a little back and forth, we got a yes. I asked if that was for everybody, and they gave a yes. Well, you can see that someone's health insurance is being paid for out of a stipend benefit, out of this contract. Now, if you look at the budget line item, if you look at back on the financial review where I had the proposed 2018 budget, you will see that BZ stipends don't seem to be accounted for. We remember it's a kind of a business seems to be set off to the side. The leftover is considered revenue, so that would be counted in the budget. Apparently, it's hard to get a real answer on that one, but this would not be included in that line item. I don't think. Maybe it is this year. I couldn't find it in that and how it would be allocated. But that's what got that question out there. So then when you look at this, I also looked at the fact that here once again this is a summary of the stipends for 12/30 and 14/30, and you'll see 12/30 and 14/30 on this one, a swap back and forth. So I'm not really sure who put the documents together, but we're paying a lot of money, which we're going to show in just a moment. Then we go down, just shows the total of what that healthcare benefit was. It's including the benefit statement over on the right hand side, close to $8,000. And then my favorite slide, which I did reference as well, is the matching game slide. And this one, once again, I'm not making it up. The one on the right was provided to the Finance Committee. I believe it was the last meeting I ever went to as the Finance Committee. And the one on the left is something that was provided to the public. When you look at quality of work, and we're paying a lot of money for this, and we were told at the meeting in the gymnasium that there's no way to cut back. These numbers don't match. Now, I urge you, if you haven't looked at this already, take a look, because if they match, I would love you to show me how they match, because from what I see, they don't seem to match. Now, there's where I had the issue. How do you trust the numbers if the numbers that you get don't seem to go together? And on the left-hand side, you'll see that one employee was left off of this grid that was put together. Once again, who's putting this together? But this is official information being provided to the public to let them know about what's happening with their finances. And this part of the superintendent's job, treasurer's job, is to keep accurate records and provide accurate information. Which one of these is accurate? A good question for the Finance Committee would be, when it comes to payroll and overall salaries and stipends, what was given to the government in our year-end reporting? All right. So when it comes to the administrative salaries, you'll see that I do put down here, we have the most recent contract. And then, as I pointed out previously, that the amount that's on the proposed 15-16 salaries doesn't match the 15-16 salary. It's about between $4,000 and $6,000 above. A couple other things that are there that look kind of odd. And then it shows the rest of the folks that work in the office. Now, when you look at bringing these all together, you'll see that overall we're paying just under $700,000 when you take into account the overall payment of salaries and the stipends that come from BZ and the amount that we're paying for all these folks. It's an astronomical amount of money to pay for, at least in my opinion, and apparently there are a number of people in our community outside of those involved in the board of directors and in our administration that think that's quite a bit as well. The next slide, slide number 14, is going to show you how we compare to the other districts that have the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the curriculum coordinator. You'll see that we have 70% of the average count of students, and we spend about 152% per student on administration. I remember a couple weeks ago when I think it was WABI said, if someone were to say that you had waste or mismanagement, and the comment came back, we spend less, over $1,000 less per student than average. But look how much more we spend on these three positions, and this doesn't even include their assistants. But yet, no way we can cut back. Pretty interesting. Here we have a list of, this is what something else I found out, and caused me to question is last year. You look at the payroll or the salaries that were approved, and you look at the director of curriculum, and then if you look at the next page, you will see that we have noticed here in the proposed budget by warrant, you'll see that the salary for the curriculum coordinator, I'm not sure if there's a difference between curriculum director and curriculum coordinator, but it's less than $70,000. On the previous page, you look at $99,000 and change. Okay, how do you get to that number? I'm not sure. This salary is $69,000. Now you do see another pretty large curriculum stipend of $22,000, but even when I add those numbers up, they don't come up to $99,000. So where's the rest of the money coming from? I don't know. Does it come from someplace else? I would think that you'd see a curriculum coordinator salary of $99,000 and change. That's just for myself. And look how much that stipend has grown over the last 4 years. And these are, once again, hopefully you're looking at documents. These are actual documents. I'm just reviewing the documents. I didn't make these documents. This isn't a story I'm telling you. So here, once again, on slide 17, you'll see here's the question I asked about System Administrator Article 5. Answer from the board was yes. If you see slide 18, you'll see that, or slide 19, I apologize. You'll see that I have a big circle and I have a couple of arrows here. There's a $21,703 for maintenance of the superintendent's central office included in Article 9, maintenance of facilities. Well, this would be another $21,000 that's not included in system administration. So, during the meeting as well, and once again, this is not personal against anybody on the board or what have you, but there were some questions asked that were pretty point blank, and as board members, and I don't really blame them, seemed pretty frustrated. As people ask more questions, they get more frustrated. And it really reminded me, it was kind of an analogy, was that when I'm volunteering in schools and I talk to students and what have you, and I see this frustration, why do students act out a lot of times? Because they're frustrated with people are telling them they're not doing their job they didn't, or they're falling behind, or they're not quite getting where they're supposed to get to, but they don't understand why, and maybe they don't have the resources that they need to understand why they don't understand what's happening with them. So the frustration seemed legitimate, because when you think about it, if someone's pretty much inferring that you're not doing your job well, but you don't understand why, maybe you haven't taken the time to look at the documents I've been sharing, maybe you haven't been getting the right information from the administration that you're counting on as part of their job to give you accurate and timely information to make the decisions that you need to make. It really reminded me that we're really in the position of a lot of our students that aren't getting what they need, and they are frustrated, and that frustration shows. So a couple of things that were shared there, though, that I want to really look at. I apologize for the quality of the photocopies here, but these are straight from this book right here. So when you think about the guidebook that should be used, it's a MSBA handbook that illustrates what board members is given to you when you become a board member. So if you look at the first one, it talks about the responsibility of the school board. They're a legislative policy-making body responsible for the development and adoption of policy. Okay, so the implementation of policy is an administrative task. Remember, these are administrators. These are the administrators. They execute. So they're supposed to execute on the plan and is performed by the superintendent and her staff, who are to be held responsible for the effective administration and supervision of the entire school. Held responsible. Okay? The board also provides for the planning, expansion, improvement, financing, construction, and maintenance of the physical plant in the school system. When we talked about some of our policies, when we talked about our building inspections, when we talked about some of the parts that we appear to be out of compliance with, this would hamper the ability of the board to effectively do their job. They'd have to rely on the administrators or those that they delegated to. Even though you delegate, though, you're still responsible. Look over to the right. They prepare the budget, the financial reports, the audits. Okay, how many members of the board of the finance committee were involved in the audit before it was presented to them on December 1st? Major expenditures, payment of obligations, policies whereby the administration may formulate procedures, regulation, other guides, orderly accomplishment of business. Once again, hopefully you're looking at the documents. It's right there in black and white. Now, when it comes to the budget and finance of school, on the next slide, and you'll see down bottom is page 11.1. So you see I brought these right from the book. I was responsible for the oversight of the school unit's finances. The board is responsible for the oversight. So if you don't know what's happening with your finances, it's hard to have oversight. The relationship of trust and accountability is sometimes referred to as the board's fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary responsibility. The board is responsible for ensuring that the policies are adopted and implemented, including those for internal accounting, records management, audit compliance, prevention and detection of fiscal improprieties, and timely financial reports to the board. Fiscal improprieties, if you've actually looked at the documents before, do you see anything that kind of raises your, might be a red flag for you? Okay. What routines are in place for inspection of the work that's being done to make sure that they're within line of the policies? We found that apparently would appear to be outside of those policies, which causes great risk to our district and our community. Over on the right-hand side, you see approved spending of allocations are budgeted by the board. Many boards have a standing finance committee to review and sign warrants as allowed. So, remember we saw the warrant that wasn't signed properly. Okay, so if we're not signing them appropriately, this really takes the control right out and puts it right into those folks that we're supposed to be providing oversight. Superintendent responsibility. Ensure financial records and accounts are accurate and up to date. We just looked at a couple that have been shared. Also, superintendent is supposed to place orders for materials and supplies approved by the board or school board committee and file appropriate financial reports and statements with the state. In practical terms, the board carries out the financial responsibilities for the school unit primarily in two ways: by adopting policies with such management goals and provide direction to the superintendent for the implementation of financial operations and approving budgets, spending, and purchasing. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see the school board budget process. We won't get into that too much because I think we've all had our opinion on how the budget goes, but you can read that as well. When it comes to the financial resources on the next page, over on the left-hand side, in consultation with the superintendent, a board is responsible for approval and adoption of the annual budget that will provide the financial basis for the building, furnishing, staff, materials, equipment needed to carry out educational programs. Most of the responsibility for establishing a structure for the school system is affected by the budget the board adopts. Other financial responsibilities include authorizing the administration to make necessary expenditures, budgeted and approved by the board. Now, if these expenditures aren't listed out in line item like they are in some areas, if you go into a town council meeting, they go ad nauseum through each line. The department I'm involved in, I think there's 93 pages of backup documentation. There's no question where this money is being spent. But if you just give a general line item and there's no detail or what have you, you have to approve it some way. You got to make sure the money's being spent in a certain way. That's why you have the finance committee there to review purchase orders, etc., and also to sign the warrants before the checks leave to make sure that that was an approved and appropriate purchase. That's why policies are so important. Adopting policies for purchase, disposal, and distribution of supplies, property, and equipment, and approving and adopting an insurance program for the district. Over on the right-hand side, you also see the board set policy, they don't carry it out. The responsibility for implementing the policy is delegated to the superintendent of schools. The board evaluates the implementation of policy through its accountability procedures. Accountability procedures. Okay, so those would be self-auditing. Those would be discussing certain procedures. Those would be when you recognize that a procedure doesn't match a policy, that we do something about it. The accountability procedures. Here we don't seem to have accountability. Conducting observations, establishing special oversight studies, right? Bringing in a group to look at what's happening to help you with your oversight and requiring periodic reports from the administrative officers. This is very important. This is the finance of the district we're talking about. Now, I also want to include why are policies important. Don't just take my word for it, just because I work with policies and procedures on a regular basis every day. But why are they in policy here? Policies save the board time and effort. If the policies are well thought out and they're put in place, which I didn't see much wrong with any of the policies it had as a financial professional, but if they're followed and they're implemented, it creates trust with the community. It creates trust with those folks that have placed their trust in you, and it also allows you credibility. But it also allows you time to focus on other items instead of spending like this summer talking about the finances of your school and questions from the community of which may have no faith and no confidence in the administrative staff of which you've delegated this to. It helps you focus on what you need to be focused on. You don't have to worry about some of these things. Now, it was also mentioned that one of the reasons we can't lower our administrative costs for system administration is because everybody has a contract. Well, we'd love to see the contracts everybody has that says you cannot be let go. But over here, you'll see this discharge of superintendent. Just for an example, I circled this. A school board may discharge a superintendent before the expiration of a contract term only for cause and only after due notice and investigation. So once we find if there's a cause, which could be anything from the acting treasurer not doing their job or whatever, if you're out there and you have concerns, you might have what you'd call cause. Then it only really, once they're put on notice, right? So if they're informed that they're outside of policy, remember there's a policy for what happens when people are knowingly and continue to be outside of policy. And then it takes a majority vote of the full membership is required. Okay. The other part that was really talked about was which was interesting, was a few board members that said we cannot tell the administration what to do with the finances once the budget's approved. Well, that's also a misnomer because once again, if you look at it, it only takes a majority of the board. So when you go back to my previous post and you look at the votes or the number of the tally, you only need 501. So from a majority of the vote, whatever combination that is, a majority of the school board members, 7 or 8 or 6 or however many it takes to get over 500, decide teachers are important and we want to re-implement those teachers, they can do that. Example was a couple years ago when a few of us realized that the teacher-student ratio seems too many students for the teachers, and we had a great discussion in public at a meeting. It was decided by a vote that we were going to allocate funds so that we could increase the teacher or decrease the student-to-teacher ratio in one in McGraw and one in Weatherby. But because Weatherby could free up a room, so the teacher made sense there, but there was no room in McGraw, so took a little different tack, but used that money for, I think it was 2 ed techs, which also alleviated, so the principals were able to do it. But that was an example where the board thought something was important, and they decided to vote. The vote went through, it was a majority, and then the administration had to execute on what they were directed by the board. That's how this works. It's the board, the administrator, and we really rely on that top administrator to make sure that they're fulfilling the desires of the board. So hopefully you just looked at those documents. As you can see, I wasn't just making things up. I'm not just sharing my opinions. We just walk through these. As you go through these, there's always debate around policy and procedure, and there's a healthy debate. Don't just take my word for it. Nobody should just take my word for it. But there's a lot of debate going on out there. So if you are interested in becoming more engaged, absolutely, we can do that for you. So remember, you can sign up for email notifications. The other thing too is I also wanted to kind of take a little pressure off the board as well. Here's an analogy. I'm not sure if people will like it or not, but being a philosophy major, I always think about this one, and it's the analogy of the cave. So in the analogy of the cave, you have people sitting there and they're looking, and what they see are the shadows of reality, and people get very comfortable with that. Now, a small percentage of those folks will turn around and see that those shadows are being created by a light behind them. Many of those will be scared by the light and they'll turn around and they're comfortable with the shadows. Few of those folks will actually venture out to see where is that light coming from. Well, when they look out and they see the light and they see there's something outside of here, many get scared and they'll go back again to what feels comfortable. And when you think about it, it's very unnerving to be in a position where you're not positive. Maybe it's not your area of subject expertise. Maybe you're just not really know what comes next. Right? So it's going to be very important. Now, few people will actually come out of the cave and see the beauty that is the world. And it excites them. we're at a very exciting point in our community here. There's so many great things going on here, not just talking about our schools, but just in general. There's great engagement, involvement. Our community really does everything we can for our students. So my encouragement for everybody is it's time for us to all work together. Once again, I'll be backing off or not really be a public face for any of these activities. I don't want to taint the activities and the good intentions of the folks that are there. There are some meetings that are being set up, and as soon as I know the exact time and dates for those, I'll get those out for you. But once again, please go back if you haven't already. Look at those documents. This is a very exciting time for us, and it's been great to hear some of the discussions that are out there. And the more dialogue we have, the better off we'll be. So appreciate your time, and until next time, thank you for joining.